Hello, everybody. Good morning. How you guys doing? Good? Good. Enough pinball? Need more? Yes. Yes. Lots more pinball. We have a full day of seminars lined up for you guys. Just to introduce myself, my name is Chase Eunice. I'm the host here of the Geek Gamer TV stage. I've been running Geek Gamer TV now for about 15 years and also being a volunteer for the show for almost that long as well. So thank you so much for coming to the stage today. We have a full lineup of seminars ranging from Homebrew and creation to John Wick we'll have later on today. But first, we're going to get started with this great group of guys talking about community, making pinball, using a lot of cool open source tools, just some really cool stuff. The gentleman from FAST Pinball and others talking about making pinball and making friends.
Right on. Okay, I've been asking this question at talks I've done lately. Like, how many people here own pinball machines? All right, so at a pinball show, that's probably going to be pretty high. How many people, let's see. Well, I messed that up already. I usually start with how many people played pinball, but we already know the answer here. Okay, so in the crowd, I recognize a lot of faces, but how many people have built pinball machines before? So, I mean, this is fantastic. We got some in progress and stuff, so that's really great. So one of the things that we really like to do with these kind of talks and panels is just kind of show everybody out there that the people that are building and creating homebrew pinball machines are just like everybody else. You know, we have that desire to build and create something. We're all looking for a new reason to make new friends, hang out, learn skills, buy new tools, all that kind of stuff. And so that's really what these shows have become, is like kind of an anchor point for us to get together, you know, celebrate, commiserate, like all that kind of good stuff. And so we've got a lot of great homebrews and stuff like that just inside the main venue. So if you're hearing this and deciding that you want to come down to the Northwest Pinball Show and see homebrew games, walk in the front door, take a right, and it's like all down the side there. A lot of good projects and stuff. So right now, we've got a bunch of us sitting in here, so we're going to cycle some people through. But first off, we've got Tanner Petch and Lynn Manuelian here. Two of the guys, I think, in addition to Steve, probably the longest travels coming to the show. And I think that that's one of the cool things about these events, is it's an incentive not just to come and show off your project, but to come and recreate, hang out and nerd out on, like, you know, this homebrew thing. So Tanner, you shipped in a game in this adorable little box. Like, talk a little bit about your project, the game you have out on the floor here.
Yeah, so I've done a few games at this point, but the current one that I'm working on primarily is called House of Flesh and Blood, and it's a small game. It's like a third the size of a normal game. The play field's like 16 by 20 inches, 16 by 18, something like that. Yeah. And it was a game that came about for a number of reasons. I've recently moved to Chicago, and I have a car instead of a truck now, so I wanted a game that would fit in the back of my car. And I also, all the games I've made have been weird sizes, just because I'm kind of interested in the outer edges of pinball and kind of unexplored space, just because pinball's been primarily a commercial endeavor the entire time it's existed. So games have been made to make money rather than necessarily to explore design space in pinball. And so I've wanted to make a small game for a long time to see how small of one I could make with it still being a full like game rather than just being kind of a novelty machine. So that's the one I have here this weekend.
Yeah, you know, it was funny too, because like I've seen pictures of this game being developed over time, and it didn't even occur to me that it was scaled down even further than it seemed. It seemed like it was kind of in the baby pack dimensions, normal widths and things like that. But when we got here setting up the booth, there was Tanner's crate in the back. We pulled this crate up. I'm like, is there two crates? Are we missing a piece? But it is really cool to see that, like you were saying, like challenging the form factors and stuff. And I think that pinball is an interesting puzzle from the homebrew and creation standpoint. Is there's concepts and principles that we all know, standard dimensions that if you want to match to, you know, stuff you can buy off the shelf, like lockdown bars and things like that. So, you know, you find what can I cobble together from what's available to make and tell a story on this, you know, on this pinball canvas. But I really like the areas that you push form further. I mean, literally, like on his game, it's pushing a ramp or a form outside of the game. So it's literally out of the box. We've been saying that all the time, like it's some novel cliche we came up with. But seeing the ball shoot out and come back in is just cool. That's something that people walking up to your machine are going to remember that, you know? So, I mean, you've got the game out here. This is the first show it's been at?
No, it was at MGC a couple of months ago, and then it was at Pinball at the Zoo in Kalamazoo, which is a much smaller show.
And so what have you done since that show to this game to kind of like tweak things, adjust things, or a new idea that fell in place? Like, how have you applied that since those first shows to what's over here?
Yeah, so I've only been working on this game since December of last year, so it's still pretty fresh. So MGC was the first time it was fully functional. It didn't do a lot at that show. And it still doesn't necessarily do a lot, but there is a lot more code and kind of that aspect since I first showed it. So.
And you got to talk about, is the cup holder on this one?
No, so right now, the nice thing about the loop that goes outside the game is that it's very easy to swap out. So right now I just have the first one I made that aesthetically I like a little bit better, but I did bring one as well that has a cup holder just because it's something a lot of people have brought up and I think is a fun idea. So at some point that's going to get swapped out.
Yeah, that's very cool, man. All the iteration and those
Yeah.
wacky ideas. I mean, you're definitely pushing the wacky idea category like all the time. I love seeing it. Okay, Lynn Manuelian,
Hey.
what's up?
Hey, yo. Morning, everybody.
So Lynn and I, he's one of the first people I met when we got into doing pinball and stuff like that. I think we had a phone call like 25 years ago.
We met over the phone, not in person.
Yeah, but we didn't meet in person till Expo a couple times ago, I think.
A year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
2021? 2022. What
I
year
don't
is
know.
it?
They're all
yeah,
blend together
2022,
at this
I think.
point. But I think that this is one of those cases where, like, you know, the number of important, exciting, like, impressive friends I've made through in my life have been very focused in the recent years around all this pinball stuff. We've all learned a lot of great things in life. We're applying it to a much more exciting hobby that we've got, and meeting cool people. This is a great excuse. Like, if you bring up the fact that you build pinball machines, like, people want to talk to you. They're curious about what that means. So, Lynn, you don't have
They're
a
curious
game.
because they don't understand that pinball still exists sometimes. They're like,
They still make those?
yeah. Oh, yeah, I get that a lot.
Is Midway still making games? I saw a guy asked me that question recently.
yeah.
And then it becomes, I have one that doesn't work, will you fix it? And I've got a list of people that I will refer to for that, you know?
Yes, I can. No, I won't.
Okay, so talk about some of the projects you're working on. You've been sharing a lot of stuff online. You don't just share like the game and concept, but also like your process for things. So talk a little bit about your process.
So I've been homebrewing pinball since like 2009 or something, right?
OG.
Yeah. This is before Pinball Life even had a pinball dev section. I think it was back on the K-Love forums is when I first was doing this, if any of you remember those, when it was K-Love and not Arcade Collectors Forums or whatever it was. So I started off with this crazy idea that, hey, there's this old Williams platform that they made 2 games for, Pinball 2000, and that's cool. So why not make more of that? Because, you know, that's an easy thing to do, right? It's just virtual things and physical things.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have 3 of those now that are currently playable at a pinball museum over in Pawtucket of my own custom things, and a whole lot more in the design phases. And I'm also doing some non-holographic games now. I call them augmented reality because that's the catchword these days. So I'm doing a bunch of non-augmented reality games as well. My most recent one is not an augmented reality game.
So I think that like one of the things that like so when the Pinball 2000 stuff that you're talking about came around, you know, it was like pushing the limits of CPU power.
Oh,
and all
it's
that stuff.
surprising that it even worked. I mean, you're trying to do these what should have been 3D models on a computer that barely could render something.
Right.
It's like, and the fact that it could render something and do a real-time device was, I don't know, it was a little bit of voodoo what they put in there.
Well, and then nowadays it's like we've got basically infinite CPU power to put into these games and stuff, and we got software frameworks, like Unity, Unreal, all that stuff that can be applied from what you do in regular day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say infinite CPU. I mean, depending on how many graphics you put into the thing and what you want to push, you are still very much so CPU bound. But we have a much better separation of CPU versus I/O now.
Sure,
that
yeah.
Back then they didn't really have to.
Yeah, the physical stuff that it takes to make it feel like pinball is like pretty standardized at this point.
Yeah.
But you know, when people ask like, what computers do I put in my homebrew game? It really does get down to like, what is your media content experience? You know, is it interactive graphics? Is it rich dynamic audio and stuff?
No, to me, it's down to money. What's the cheapest thing I can get that works? No,
Which is a good challenge on its own.
Yeah,
How do you distill something down into the most affordable, replicatable, imageable
Sure.
CPU device?
Like these days, especially, you can get $130 single board the size of your fist computers, and they're equivalent to like a PlayStation 2, Xbox 360 era thing.
Right.
You don't need much more than that for pinball, really, unless you're really pushing the graphics a lot more. And one of my recent games that I made last year uses 3 screens. It uses one an HD screen, one mini screen, and one like super stretch screen. So all those are coming out of this one thing, and it's using textured lit shaders, real models, and all kinds of stuff. So it runs at an inconsistent 28 to 33 frames a second. I'm going to clamp it to 30 frames a second eventually, but it still runs off this thing. So
yeah,
why pay more than $140?
Well, I think that is the other thing too, is like, a lot of these homebrew games and stuff like that are getting more and more refined. That like you've seen a couple iterations on it, and some people will be coming to talk about some of the stuff today who have refined their games even further. But I think that's one of the things too, is that a lot of these projects that you have, like we say all the time, like, the hard part of the project, everybody's hard part is different. Some people look at the woodworking as like piece of cake, others see it as like that's the challenging part to get formed just right. Software is a different challenge, all that kind of stuff. But it does get down to the layer that, like, a lot of what I've obsessed about lately, working with some of the companies doing commercial games, is like BOM. Like, how do you get this produced affordably, sourced reliably, all that kind of stuff. So it is really cool to see a lot of the vendors and stuff like that are building and providing electronics, building parts, providing parts, recreating classic parts and stuff like that. It's a lot of the times the homebrew games that we dream up are inspired around a certain mechanism that was in an existing game. You want to take like a Rudy head mechanism and put a different face on it and stuff like that. Like, companies are building these, like Planetary's making those available now to cobble together, put different faces on things. So now I think that not only are companies looking at the homebrew stuff as an exciting new place to find inspiration, but it's going both ways now, that you can actually go and look at that one mech that was on a certain game, you want to turn into something else.
And it's finally back in stock again.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can get
like,
it.
That's the cool thing. And I
think
think
when I started, I couldn't find mechs. Like, I had to, the very first game, I was working on Hunter Cruises, my very, very first game way back in the day. And it started off with mechs from a Bally Blackjack, because I got that for free out of a barn, and I just took the playfield and I left the rest of it there. I didn't care at the time, right? But yeah, I mean, that was the only way to really get it. And yeah, there were some places online you could buy it, but it really wasn't prevalent like it is now.
Yeah.
And even now, there's still a lot of mechs you might not be able to get very easily. Like Williams diverters are hard to find. So when I find them, I don't tell people where I get them. And the Star Wars Episode 1 like whole saucer mech assembly thing, which is really nice. It's not like 5 pieces. I buy them all up so people can't buy them. So
you are the homebrew hoarder.
Oh, I very much so.
Well, I think that, like, as we're seeing more of those parts, like there's a display in the Planetary booth just when you walk in the door. This like big. I mean, I'm jealous. Like, I need to build some of those like road rigs for stuff. Otherwise, our booth ends up being just stuff dumped on the table. But a lot of the mechs that are available to get off the shelf, and I'd say reach out. There's a lot of energy about, like, what are the mechs you can't get. Sometimes people don't even know that that's the stuff to produce and reproduce. And sometimes it's just a matter of like sending one more blueprint to a manufacturer to make something. So, also, I was going to say too that, like, we are doing. We have our Pin DevCon theater. It's at the end of the row by the homebrew stuff. We're going to be doing some deeper dives on some of these topics. So some of these guys will be sitting in and, diving in further about, software process or iteration on physical forms and stuff like that. So some of these things are just going to be the tip of the iceberg here. So definitely stop by. And then again, everybody else will be at their games, working on things, tweaking things. So everybody loves to talk about this
I won't
stuff.
be. I didn't bring my game here. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. I just came here because I want to hang out with these guys. I know these guys. I've met them in multiple expos. I brought a game last year. This year, it just wasn't going to happen. But I still want to come out and hang out.
Dude.
And so here I am.
Very cool. Okay, let's rotate out. You guys should like nominate, tap somebody else.
I show up here and now he's kicking me off the table. See how it goes?
All right, who else wants to come up? All right, Sean's eager to jump in. Good morning.
Good morning.
I like the idea of the tag team. Yeah. You're up. Go. All right. So, Sean Irby, local hero, building the 8-Ball Beyond game and other projects, and Steve Condris from the Pinball Room. That was the Steve I mentioned. Another long road trip to get up here. Like, we're so happy that you came up
from Utah. Woo.
Okay, so let's talk about your project. Like, why don't you dive in first? The 8-Ball Beyond game. We've seen it all over the place. Johnny Krapp did the artwork. He's here. He did the show the show poster this year. So, talk about your project. Like, how's it going, and what are you doing next?
So I started trying to build a game in 2019. It was an 8-Ball Beyond. I was just throwing some geometry together that I thought would be cool, and I worked on that for a year, and realized that I had to learn a lot of lessons, and the layout that I was putting together actually wasn't very good. And so I realized if I started over, I could do something a lot better. And so that's why I started making 8-Ball Beyond. And the concept was just to put a shot from each of the 8-ball games into one play field and do like a futuristic take on it. And so I've been working on that over the past 3 years, and I brought it to the Northwest show for the first time last year, and have been taking it to a few different shows around the country since then. And after this show, I'm gonna put it on location at Adaball in Seattle. And hopefully leave it there.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's the point. Awesome. I mean, there's others that have, like Anthony's got his game on location. Like the idea that like homebrew games are robust enough and stable enough to be on location is super cool. I think that's where like a lot of the attraction we hear a lot now at these shows where people want to come and see the homebrew games, experience that. But now it's an attraction that like location owners are willing to take a risk on, like maybe something that might not earn as much as another game initially is an attraction. It's bringing people in, they're buying drinks and hanging out. Pinball is like a travel destination, tool these days, Okay, so you've taken the game out to different shows and stuff like that. What's some of the feedback and tweaks or adjustments or things that you've learned? Because you talked about your process of learning. Now you've got the game actually on location. Do you stand over that, watch people play, and factor in what you might want to do next or change, or like what is that experience like seeing people play your game?
It's illuminating. I think some things that are obvious to me, like how to do the skill shot portion of the game. I worked on it for so long. Like, of course, it's clear to me, but other people are like, "What am I selecting here?" And it takes a few games to kind of get it. So that's like a common point of feedback. And another thing is, I don't know, people will treat it like a pinball machine. Yeah. And I guess when I first brought it to this show last year, I was expecting people to maybe be a little gentle and
they're slamming it, knocking around.
Yeah, I think like within 5 minutes, like the game was like being tilted around.
Was that Lynn? Because he did that to my game too.
Yeah.
If you're a homebrew, you can hold up to Lynn. I could put a Lynn sticker on it that says he beat.
Lynn approved.
Yes. Well, I think that is another really good point. It's like, again, when you're building your baby, you're babying this project. You know exactly not to lean on something or like not to shoot something too hard. But it's interesting to see what people do not knowing everything that you've done. All the things that are so obvious to you, they're just slapping balls around and hitting things and stuff. And you do find that like, wow, this shot that I think is so easy to make, nobody else is making and stuff. And I've heard, being able to look at like the logs and stuff like that on gameplay to see that like, wow, my great novel idea I have implemented, nobody's even able to take advantage of it. So that's an area where like getting to shows is a chance to road test it with people that like think the project's cool, but also know pinball really well. So they're gonna like challenge your design and challenge your idea and stuff. And I think that's one of the cool things about getting in a physical location with everybody is like we can all like share ideas back and forth, give feedback like critically because we know what the process is like. But then the public coming up will bring up something that we may not have even thought about at all. So a lot of good stuff there. Okay, so Steve Condris, Pinball Room. Like we hear all the time. I got into homebrew pinball because of Steve and his YouTube channel and all the content and stuff like that. So I think that what you've done is really, really great, and I think it definitely speaks to a certain group of people that like fall in love with your journey of making pinball and want to do the same thing. So talk about your projects and your channel and all your content and stuff like that, because I think a lot of people are really inspired by it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite parts of getting more involved in pinball and coming to some conventions now and things like that is being able to meet people like Ben right there and others that have watched my videos. It was really my beautiful wife here in the audience. It was my primary kind of driver to go through and start doing my YouTube channel. I'm a software product designer by day, and so the design manager, yeah. And I don't do much outside of a blue screen until after work, and so I love having projects like many of us do, right? Just tinkering on things, right? I built my first like MAME arcade cabinet with a buddy like 20 years ago. We built a few of those. That was fun, and I always loved pinball as a kid, but it always just it was never demystified for me. About 15 years ago, I had a neighbor who was big into pinball and was an operator. He kind of taught me how to work on them. That gave me the idea of, okay, this could be doable. Maybe one day I can try to build a pinball machine.
There you go.
And I'm kind of glad I didn't try to start back then, because I don't think I could have back then, because like how Lynn was doing it back in the day, the learning curve was still way too high for me back then. Now with folks like you with FAST and all the great people that have these controller boards that make it really easy to plug things in, a better availability of parts, not everything, but it's better now than it was, I'm sure, 15 years ago, right?
Originally, I put high power through a switch, and that made me.
There's some safer ways to do it now. You know?
Lynn was saying originally just put high power right through a switch to get his solenoids firing. So yeah, there's better ways now. But yeah, so when I first started my project, so my Led Zeppelin homebrew that is here at the show, come by and play it. I started that about 3.5 years ago or so in my head, probably 4 or 5 years before that, sketching things. And anyway, I started looking around and trying to build it, and I found bits and pieces here. I came across FAST with their starter bundle. I came across Mission Pinball and a few other sources, and like wasn't sure which one. Like, okay, I'll pick this one, I'll try that one, I'll see what's happening. Right. And it was difficult to find, like, there's not just like one source of everything. And not that I've tried to be that, but all right, well, my wife's like, you know, people want to hear about this. You should do a video and start documenting it. And I figured, okay, that could be hopefully maybe some sort of repository of not all the knowledge, definitely, but at least of like lessons learned from me and
like capture your experience.
Yeah,
and like
and hopefully
share.
that could be an inspiration. Anyway, and it has, at least for some people. So, and it's been really helpful for me because like you don't really learn something until you have to try to teach it to somebody else or ramble on it for 30 minutes on a YouTube video, and then you learn it more in your head. So that's kind of been my approach.
Well, I think that like capturing the journey like that is like really important because you know in the early days, like you know when we were starting FAST and building electronics, you know there was the Mission Pinball framework that came out to work with all sorts of hardware platforms. So in that first wave, we were kind of like we're getting our hardware figured out. The Mission Pinball framework is growing. Like all right, we're all kind of in this. All the early adopters are sharing their experience. Okay, that was the first wave. Then you get the next wave of people inspired by that who want to jump in, and that's where we find we could do some better documentation. We could track some of the stuff a little bit better, but like really, truly, like you don't realize that some of this information doesn't exist until you realize, how would I even tell somebody to do what I just did? So we had at FAST had recently gone through, and Brad Madden redid all of our documentation top to bottom, which is incredible. Like it is, I'm so proud to say that we've had customers who have used other hardware platforms who've called me up on the phone to say, I bought your platform because I felt like I owed it to you because I've been using your docs all the time. And I was like, so impressed to have like documentation be something so exciting. But again, a lot of, like I was saying, these iterations and these different generations of people building games, when we're all doing it together, you kind of absorb it all. But then the idea of like, you know, the third generation, the fourth generation coming through is like, you want to say, start with the docs, start with videos like what Steve does and stuff like that, get primed for it, and then we'll help you answer the questions that we can't figure out beyond that. So let's talk about your game specifically, because I think Led Zeppelin, you've got, it's one of those games that, at least to me, looks like inspired by the mech that needed to exist to make this game make sense. So talk about the literal stairway to heaven in your game.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, everybody has their own approach on how they come across building a game, right? They have a theme, or they have a mech, or they have some other idea. And I had a few different themes kicking around, but the one that kind of got me the most excited was I tend to think about a theme and then think about, okay, what if I think of that theme, like what's something that like has to be there, right? And for me, when I thought about Led Zeppelin, and I like Led Zeppelin, listened to it a bunch in college, and no one had ever done a Led Zeppelin. And the first thing that came to mind was, well, you got to have like a Zeppelin, and you probably need to have like a stairway to heaven of some sort, right? I mean, it's, you know, we could talk about stairway to heaven on other things, but and that just really excited me. I'm like, I don't know if I've ever really seen like a stair, like a motorized, you know, movable like staircase type thing, or escalator in a pinball machine. And there's some close ones that I found since then. But anyway, that really excited me. I'm like, I wonder if I could build that. Well, and then if I do build that, well, what else would go around that? And
how do you control it? How do you make it do what you want? Because I mean, I think that's one of the things too, is like now with all the software frameworks, available parts and stuff like that that are out there, you can go, I can take this plus this plus this, and I've made pinball, right? Yeah. Go look at this mech. It's like, that is not just a unique design all the way through, but then conventionally, from the software standpoint, it becomes, how do I track, is there a ball on that stair or not? Is you know, those kinds of things.
I'm still figuring that part out, by the way.
But that's the depth of it. And I think that with a lot of like, you know, software background and product development and things like that, those are the areas where if you look at it like it's a project, you know, how would you spec this out to get it produced? And that's one of the things I think that a lot of times as people share questions and stuff that they have about their game, I'm trying to do this. And we usually like encourage people to make a thorough attempt to like define the problem, define the challenge, and then people love to take a break from their own projects and their own challenges to jump in and help somebody else with something. So if I read something that somebody posts on like our FAST like Slack channel going, I'm trying to make a mech that does this, I've got these two things, it's got to fit in a space like this, any suggestions? that's a much easier starting point than like, I want to make this, anybody have any ideas? And so we encourage people to like, define more clearly what it is you want to make, because then the support is easier to manage. But I'd say a decent amount of the time is just by you clearly defining it as what you're trying to do, you're going to work the process out yourself and go like, oh, I need to add another switch to that. That would help me track these things,
Yeah.
So I would say, like, with your game and this complicated mech in there, you said you're still working through dialing it in to be exactly what you want it to be.
Yep.
What else do you want to do with the game? I mean, do you have an endpoint in mind? When is the game finished at a certain point? Like, talk about that part of the game.
Yeah.
Because it looks beautiful, like fit and finish style. Like, it looks really great.
No, thank you. No, Expo is the deadline.
Okay.
I want,
Get to Expo, it's done.
I don't know. Like everybody knows, right? These games, like you can never be done with them, right? Even the manufacturers, right? They're probably never really done, but they eventually have to draw the line. Like I'm feeling the same pressure. Like I loved everything I've done with this game, and there's so many more things I'd love to do and I need to do. But I'm kind of drawing the line of like I have to be done by Expo because I really want to get going on my next project and one after that, and that's what I think is so addictive about this. And I want to go back to one of the things you mentioned really fast about like being able to kind of how you frame a question and then get feedback from the community, because out of everything, I've mentioned this in several of my videos, so some of you probably heard it, but like literally I could not have done what I'm doing with my skill set 15 years ago. The things were not there, and even today I've been able to hobble it together, but it's only because I haven't had to do it by myself. Like Anthony, I owe you so many dinners and so many things, because Anthony Van Winkle here has been so helpful, and not just him, but so many people all throughout the community. Like that's one of the most important things I'd say is, find a tribe, find a group. There's so many communities, the FAST one, there's others out there, Mission Pimp, like find a community, because you'll enjoy being able to eventually start to contribute to it, and you're also going to get so much out of it, the friendships, the relationships, but also just the knowledge. Like anyway, it's huge. So
the knowledge is a big part too. I mean, like seeing like one of my favorite things is when the new people are helping the newer people, and I say that all the time now, but it truly is like, oh my gosh, I can answer this question. Like I just learned this, to be able to chip in and help out. Like people want to pay it forward.
No, it feels good when you can answer your first question, and they're like, you're like, nobody else is answering. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Like, okay, I'm gonna. And hopefully no one corrects me. Like, yes, okay, I got that one right.
Well, and even the effort to try. I think that's one thing too that we always tell people. Like, we'll get some people that will like private message, like, hey, I got this problem. I'm like, take it to the main channel. There's no shame in this stuff. We've all hooked things up backwards. We've all blown things up. Like, I mean, it's gonna happen, And I think going back to the docs and stuff like that, we've tried to be very consistent. Like all of our documentation uses the same wire colors everywhere. So if you send me a picture of what's under your playfield, I can look and go, that's wrong. If you followed our guidance. And so these are just areas where like that little bit helps with the support end of things too. But again, like everybody's gonna make a mistake. And I think we really like try to reduce the shame factor and all that kind of stuff. Because the bottom line is, if you look back far enough, you're building a pinball machine, okay? Like this is not something that everybody in your neighborhood is doing. You're the person making a pinball machine. So it's expected that you're gonna make mistakes. It's a chance to learn something. And I think if you weren't pushing the limits and trying to make something creative and add some more joy to your life around this kind of joy, misery, back and forth. But it is something that we all need in our life, and I think that the community part around it and the support is really great. So
absolutely.
Awesome, guys. Okay, so tap out, find somebody else to come in. Dinner guy. What's up, man? All right.
Most knowledgeable, the least knowledgeable at the same time.
All right. This is the Anthony Van Winkle that's owned all the dinners from Steve. And so one of the key maintainers in the Mission Pinball framework, has designed multiple games now, conversion kits, all sorts of great things like that, and a couple of them are out there in the field. Spencer Holman with Futurama. We only just met at the show last year when the game showed up and I was not even aware that the project existed. You think that like by now I would know everything all the time, but that's one of the new joys these days, is showing up at a show and going, what is this? So very cool projects, like a lot of different ways to get to these projects. And so I think that maybe being able to share a little bit of that, the project you're working on, how you got to it. I think both of you have a unique story around that kind of stuff. So why don't you go first?
Yeah, my current project is Swords of Vengeance, which is the sequel to Swords of Fury. It's a conversion kit from an existing Swords of Fury machine that creates new story, new characters, full LCD, DMD-sized, but LCD artwork, all new music, all of your normal things that you would have in a modern game, like, modes, completions, mini wizards, full wizard modes, multi-balls, all that stuff. But I'm not much much of a playfield designer. Like my first game, Mass Effect, I started with Game of Thrones because I really love the Game of Thrones playfield. I'm like, okay, what are some things I can tweak? What are some ways that I can make it a little bit more different, a little more interesting? But I have no interest in trying to vacuum form a ramp or like weld a wire form. I want to go to Pinball Life and order a set of Game of Thrones ramps, put them on my machine, and call it a day.
Right.
So I'm much more of taking an existing geometry and coming up. What does this speak to me? What game would I put on this playfield? And even thinking about my next projects, whenever I go out and play a new game, I think if I had this machine and I stripped it all down, what game would I put here? Like what sort of style would go on this? So my process is about thinking of the story, thinking about what types of objectives. I'm very much into a narrative, like have some completions, have some choices that can affect the strategy, that affect the gameplay. Again, Game of Thrones, you can vastly change the rules of the game based on what you like and some of the choices that you make. So I focus less on, building another whitewood because this lane is, an eighth of an inch too far to the left, and focus more on how can I create a game that will be interesting. And once you've played all the way through and played it 100 times, what can you do to make it play differently, to have a new game on top of that?
I think that's the idea of a narrative starting point. I think I've been hearing more and more. I mean, we talked about the inspirational mech and things like that. When we were down at TPF and we met Kyle Smet with his Friday the 13th game, his starting point was narrative. And so that what is the story that you want to tell on this pinball stage here? And I think that is something that, whether it's a mech that you're inspired by or the fact that okay, if this is the stage I'm working with, what can I use these existing shots for to advance the storylines up? So I think that, with what you've done from a production standpoint, the idea of working with, music producers and stuff like that to create the in-depth sound that you have in Swords of Vengeance, that's not only using the existing layout, but then playing with sound dynamics and stuff like that, and all the screen and new characters that you built into it, that's really telling that story. So when you look at the Swords of Vengeance game, I know that that's a big project. Do you have an endpoint in time that you want to do with that, and what do you want to do next? What's the next story that you want to tell?
Well, for Swords, people are always asking me when it's going to be available because they want to buy it. So
That's me. I have a Swords of Fury, and I would love to upgrade it.
Yeah, good problem to solve.
So that's mostly. But I mean, the trade-off there is that I need to keep myself in check and constantly remind myself this is not a movie, it's not a video game. You don't have to have dozens and dozens of full animated cutscenes and dialogue and all this. It's a pinball game. Focus on getting to the end of the game.
Right.
And so that's sort of me checking myself, because the biggest difference there is compared to something like Mass Effect or other ideas I like to do like Avatar or Halo or things like that, is if you're building a game from existing IP, it's all there. You can buy the game, crack open the resource files, and you've got all the dialogue from the game.
Right.
Which one makes it really easy because you don't have to find the dialogue,
right.
You don't have to record it or write it or anything like that. But it's also a good constraint because when I put Mass Effect before it went to the arcade, I saw a mode and there's it's not really it's a little bit boring. There's no call-outs here, so I wanted to add some call-outs. So I went to the Mass Effect game code and found the call-outs, and there were 12 files. So okay, that's it. I can't come up with new stuff.
What can you tell by shuffling this around?
You pick from those 12 and you move on. So it's much faster. Whereas if you're going completely from scratch, it's it's almost overwhelming because you have to come up with everything. And if you don't like it, you can always change it. And then it goes back to the thing where you're never done because you can always keep working on it. So starting with something that already exists and you have a finite set of resources, that's definitely the way to go.
And I should inject the necessary IP restrictions and fair use examples. These are for personal use, inspired by the properties. These are not products to be sold.
It's like fan fiction, but pinball.
There you go. So, and I guess the last key thing, we picked up Mass Effect to bring down to the show from Icebox in Fremont there. So this is a homebrew game on location, earning coin. That's fantastic.
Dozens of quarters.
Yeah.
Dozens of quarters.
There you go. Well, very cool. Okay, so Spencer, again, I know very little, probably of everybody here, I know the least about you. So tell us all a little bit about how you got into this Futurama project, which we hear all the time online. This is a theme people wish existed from a major manufacturer on scene. You are the Futurama homebrew guy. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it was my dream theme. Before I even owned pinball machines, then I became an operator. Started buying commercial pinball machines and routing them. And I was like, I could probably build this. I mean, the software is the hard part. And then I found Mission. And so that was like, okay, so this is reasonable. This
Right.
is like editing MySpace back in the day, as far as just just a little bit more complicated, but not too much. Not real programming. I felt like, but I still didn't know where to start. But then I know people around town in pinball, and a friend called me one day and was like, "Hey, would you want this?" And it's just a picture of this Futurama game that is made with all these like toys from the show and different but it doesn't. And so it just kind of came to me what happened. This guy named Evan had built one in 2005 with, again, kind of where like Lynn was saying, there was just not stuff available. So
Right.
he used the board set from an old Atari Superman game, and then just kind of implemented Futurama on top of it. All the whoosh and swooping and soaring sounds kind of
Okay.
fit that.
Okay.
He had a DVD player in there with switch buttons wired to change the scene. So it was amazing. It was really cool. I
Yeah.
mean, unfortunately, when it came to me, it was in pieces. It was
Okay.
in boxed up, and he'd actually passed when he'd been reworking it and redoing it. And
Okay.
so it didn't work when it got to me. There was no way I could do it with that existing really creative. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to redo this, I'm going to redo this really cool. And
Yeah.
so that's when I just kind of gutted it, kept the play field, but reworked the whole upper 2/3 of it. Again, didn't know what I was doing, and your website was down when I looked at first. This was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was like maintenance, fast pinball. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I got to figure something else out. So
man,
I used
that's awesome.
I used Multimorphic, and that's been a fun journey. A lot of boards have gone through, but yeah, and then it's been a blast. So last year I brought it out for the first time. It didn't have any modes or anything. The rotor broke. That's kind of the trial by fire. Like, let's see
Yeah.
what breaks. Let's
Yeah,
put it out and
exactly.
see what, and then same thing is happening this year. Of course, it's different stuff, and
Yeah.
so but it's really cool to see people play it and see people think about it. And again, that what's obvious and what's not. It is great having an existing IP. I have all the scripts in the Futurama shows. I can just do a search from and find dialogue or stuff.
interesting.
Although there's obviously not anything like shoot the ship or hit the ramp or So I'm trying to figure out what. That's probably my next step before next year is to get some voice acting done. I actually did ask Billy West. He said no, but can go ahead. He's like, pinball still exists? That was his first thing he said. Is there still making pinball? I said, well, some people are, yeah. But he's like, I can't do that, but full support. I hope you do that. It'd be great. So
Yeah.
just got to find people who can do the voices. And
Well, I think so I mean, the idea of, again, this built into your project is almost like the carrying on the project that was started by the original designer and stuff. But it is just another way to get in and get started. I mean, if that hadn't fallen into your lap, who knows if this would be a starting point.
I wouldn't be as far along, but I would still be doing it.
Yeah. Well, so I guess so now this is the second time it's been to the Northwest Pinball Show, and you said already people are gonna be playing it. I mean, you got in last night, a little later in
I
the
had a
evening.
crazy, I had a terrible day yesterday, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, yeah, you're here now. We're goofing off around Homebrew Pinball,
Yeah.
so that's a safe place.
Yes.
So what do you plan to do next? I mean, at some point, Futurama is going to be buttoned up, and you feel like this project you can call complete. Do you have ideas for other projects that you want to do beyond that?
I do. So I've thought about doing Phony Talks Pro Skating.
Okay.
Don't want to do the actual licensed one, but
Right.
I have
Phony
I have the idea of having this. So because skateboarding, like a game, if anybody's ever played it, it's very iconic, right?
It's a
And,
great
it's all
game.
about combos.
Yep.
And so having the play field, basically the animation on the screen would be your skateboarder, and when you hit different ramps or tricks, it would fluidly animate to them doing those tricks or
Very cool.
So that's going to be a lot more tricky on the display, on
Yeah.
the programming for sure. So that's part of why I didn't. That one hasn't happened yet, but I do have a blank cabinet.
Okay.
So I'm starting.
canvas has been made.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably gonna get a star set this weekend, so I'm
Sweet.
getting there. So that's So that'll probably be the next one. That one, or I've thought about Adventure Time.
Okay.
But I kind of have hesitation with the IP thing because I do want to be able to at least route the one I have, even if
Yeah.
I don't make tons of them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a restriction where it's like I don't want to get a cease and desist letter, but I also want to be able to put out and share it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of tempted to go a non-IP route for my next game, even though it's been a lot of fun. Ideally that I would make IP games because I love having an existing community. I love having a story you can get into and go into okay, so what is pinball about this?
Right.
Like a Futurama, it's the deliveries they always do, and they always start as a delivery and then end up as a crazy adventure. And so that's you start this mode and you think it's one thing and it's actually something else, and that's been really fun to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I kind of follow the story again, or something that seems like pinball would be a great way to implement or to live in this world.
Yeah. Well, I think that is, again, we're talking about story here, and I think that is something that, originally the idea of the Homebrew stuff was it's random little projects people are doing, but people would give it an extra look if it's got like an IP they recognize, But I think now it's become its own thing. People want to see what was well created by somebody like them. So, going the route of like, no IP, but something that's got beautiful artwork and is got a lot of fit and finish to it, is still going to be attractive on its own. I mean, that's what we saw with like the 8-Ball Beyond game, like inspired by other existing games, but its own
so cool.
thing, and it's got its own legs and stuff. So it's very cool. Man, you guys make cool stuff. All right. Tag some other people. Let's bring a couple other people. I think we still have like, 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Raise your hand, you haven't been up yet.
Brian, I see you. Is it just you and me?
All right.
Yeah.
Dude, let's bring Jack up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got an extra seat here, man. Come on up. There you go. Come here. Come on.
Oh, Aaron. Hello.
Hi. All right. So, Jack Bridges, we met at a pinball show many
10 years ago, maybe?
So long ago.
Here?
Yeah, I think we were still named a different company back then.
You were a different company.
Yeah. So.
Skill shot pinball.
It was.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I like Fast better. I think it worked out okay.
Yeah.
But so Jack and I met a long time ago. He's been working on his Muppets game on and off through life, over the last so many years. And then Brian Cox, he was the first guy to bring a game running fast hardware in the Mission Pinball framework with the Tattoo Mystique game. Got a whole other iteration on that, and I'll let you talk about that. But Jack, let's dive in here first.
Brian and I are opposites.
Okay.
He gets a game done like every month, and I've been working on mine for 10 years. And right now it's not even flipping because I took most everything off of the whitewood.
Right.
But I am working on it, and I've been working on it more. As Aaron says, life has been happening, and there's a lot of stuff. But I just switched over to the new platform, so I'm redoing my whole back box, and once that's done, I'll redo my whole playfield. I'm not going to cut a new whitewood yet, but I have moved some stuff around. Maybe it'll shoot better, hopefully.
Well, I think that again, it's we've been around each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Friends now, all that kind of stuff. And I think that those are some of the areas that even while some people may iterate much more quickly on their projects and stuff like that, there's the presence and the support. I mean, sometimes just posting, hey, look what I did this weekend, and have people chime in like, oh my gosh, and you're inspired to be like, all right, I want to get my project going again.
Yeah, that's true. I often say, I talk to a lot of people at the booth. They come up. I mean, it hasn't been so much this year, but in previous years.
Yeah.
What is it about it you love? And I'm like, the Slack channel. Buy hardware and just talk to everybody. The people in there are great. They're so supportive, so helpful. It's just wonderful.
Well, I think that the inspiration is a big thing because it does straddle that line between like, wow, that's really cool what this person did, and I can never do what they do. And I think that what I love about the community is that everybody wants more pinball to exist. So the idea of like encouraging you, giving constructive feedback and stuff like that, all starts to feed on like inspiration and stuff. The things that are like, you know what, I can do this too. And I think that with a project like you've had over such a long period of time, you have gotten to see entire new people start and finish their first game, and then start their next game before you've even finished yours.
Yeah.
So that's no disrespect, but you got to look at now. You're with your theme. New inspiration you might have, seeing what somebody else who's come along and done some new novel thing that you might be like, I want to apply that same thing to my game. Like, I'm sure you've seen things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody who's making pinball is an inspiration. Whether it's something that a Homebrew is doing, first getting your first like prototype flipping. Oh my gosh, everybody cheers for that. Versus something like Labyrinth that is a production game and it's all using, if not the same exact hardware I am, some of the same pieces. Right. And it's just, everything is a huge inspiration.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that like, that you talk about the encouragement and like the support, and you've always been a big cheerleader for like whatever people are doing. You come down to the show with your family, you're sitting there playing games. Like this is the kind of thing that having that be a part of your life and stuff like that is like, I mean, we get to a certain age and we need something to do with our time. We need something to feel a little bit of inspiration around. And I think that's the thing that we all get talking about, like who's got which tool, who's got which devices, who had bought which CNC router and which one was good and not good and stuff like that.
I recommend Avid. This is not a paid sponsorship, but I bought an Avid CNC just to do pinball playfields. It works wonderfully. But anyway.
So now we'll go to the other end of the spectrum here. So
Yeah,
Brian's
and
been
Muppets,
doing
Muppets is like a great fan fiction theme, right?
Yeah.
Lots of material to work with there.
So
Can't
you've
wait to see
got,
that.
we were talking about Tattoo Mystique. That was the game that you brought, like, what, 2000?
It was like 2014, maybe.
Okay.
Right?
Way
And
way
then-
back.
Yeah, and
It's
then
like
we
10
all,
years ago now.
Yeah,
I
and
can
even
do math.
before that, it was the year before that we were in Chicago. Was when you guys were there, you and Dave, and
Oh,
I
yeah,
already
yeah.
met
Yep.
you, but then we met Brian Madden and
Gabe.
Yeah.
who were doing the MPF.
Yeah, so Brian Madden and Gabe Knuth, original founders of the Mission Pinball Framework.
Yeah, and so it was a perfect match because now you had all the homebrew hardware coming together with this open source software, and it was a game changer because, like some of the other people said here, like you were sort of limited to using vintage hardware that you had to buy off eBay and then fix it and mix and match and all this other stuff, and so the homebrew community kind of like sort of started to take off at that point once you had the combination of all these things, and then combine that with all of the repro parts that started to pop up, like Pinball Life and everything. Everybody was starting to remake some of these mechanisms.
Right.
And then also some of even the small batch manufacturers started to pop up. So that it was like the right synergy at the right time. So waiting, Jack, probably is a good idea.
Yeah.
You have all the parts now and all the systems in place.
Well, you talk about 10 years ago at Expo, it's like that we kind of hit that intersection with like the maker movement. Like everybody's inspired to find new devices, build and make things move around and stuff.
Yeah, it became much easier.
Well, and that show was very interesting because I think we all have these grand visions of like we'll go and our projects will be finished and it'll all be gorgeous. And I have a picture somewhere of like the booth and it looks like a shop. Like play fields are up, like people are hanging over things and tweaking things, and I was like a stress case around all that.
It's changed quite a bit.
But even then, we had people coming up going, I've never seen inside a pinball machine before, which seemed baffling to me because most of us in this audience have worked on and tweaked and messed with pinball machines. Yeah. But you look at it as like the idea of opening some things up and seeing what you can do inside these machines. It was so inspiring. I think we made a lot of new friends in that era, but then also it turned a lot of people on to I know what it takes to work on a pinball machine, but I want to make my own. It's the same form factors and stuff like that, but just having to learn some new skills along the way.
Yeah, and I think this year, like if you go to that homebrew lineup,
Yeah.
it's such a huge change from where it was 10 years ago because every game in that lineup is pretty much custom made, but looks like a professional game
Yeah.
that like you could have bought from one of the manufacturers.
That's one thing too. We were at the Texas Pinball Festival back in March, and we did a panel similar to this. And we were wrapping up, and we're like, "Goodbye, thanks for being here." And Ernie Silverberg jumps in. He's like, "Hey, come to the homebrew games and check it out, but don't be intimidated." Like that lineup there was incredible. All the fit and finish, full art dress, assets, animations, everything. In fact, Kyle's Friday the 13th game won Best of Show over major manufacturers, which was shocking. It's a great game. It's not shocking on the game, but that's an impressive feat. So having to disclaim the fact that these homebrews and how fit and finish and nice they look should not be an intimidating factor. Just these projects had a lot of passion put into them.
it's just the fact that things have gotten a lot easier with the fact that we have all the support now.
Yeah,
Right.
and people with big printers that are more than happy to print artwork for you, help with playfields and get artwork on
You
playfields and stuff.
bring your strength to it, whether it's art or the electronics or the mechanical stuff. You can bring your strength, and there's other things there to support you, right?
So talk about Tattoo Mystique. Okay, so this is, are you calling it the revised, the enhanced?
Yeah, I call it the 2.0, and I think it's sort of like the history of what we're all discussing here. Is that that very first version was very much like a mess of wiring, vintage parts you had to repair, and so
Right.
the reliability of it was not great, and if it breaks at a show, it's possibly down for the whole show. The show is a terrible place to try to work on a pinball machine. But I was sort of encouraged by the amount of support that machine got, and everybody wanted it to go to different shows in different places, and it wouldn't be right to do that because if it just showed up and then broke, that's not
Right.
good. So I took the effort to sort of now that we have all these really high end, not high end, but more robust parts available.
Yeah.
I took the opportunity to redesign the entire thing from scratch. So it's got a new layout. All parts are off the shelf. It's got new game code, everything, and so it's very stable and easy to run. And basically, you turn it on and it just works. And that's not. I'm not saying that because I did it. I'm saying it because that's the state of the way things are right now. That it just works.
And not only have you built one game twice in the time that I have taken to try and get mine done, you've also built a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, there's a whole. Yeah, well.
Yeah, talk about your Any Brian project. I think you've done a really good thing, putting your artist touch on some of these classics and then adding to them.
When you say so I built a lot of games, but just to be fair, a lot of these are 2.0 versions of Bally games that you can now buy the playfields through CPR, and so you get a huge head start if you're using an existing playfield layout, right? But yeah, the Any game. So if anyone who collects pinballs knows that you can't fit a bunch of pinball machines in your house, you don't want them in the living room or in the kitchen and all that stuff, right? So if you're going to have 10 custom pinball machines, it's much better if they all fit in the same cabinet, right? It's easier to store a playfield than it is to store a whole new cabinet. So I realized that after game 7 or 8, and that's not going to work. So I started making all my new games fit into the existing cabinet, and then it's basically just you just hang them on the wall. And but that's the whole Any game system. It's sort of like a MAME system, but for pinball. And you just have these playfields, and you just plug in the playfield. And as long as you're careful with the wiring harnesses being standardized, then it becomes pretty easy. And so it's not. It's more a statement of the state of the industry that you can buy all this stuff, and there's support to help you build it.
No, and I think that we talk about all the effort it takes to get to the show and be prepared for a show and stuff, and we had a friend of ours, Chris, was going to come up and join us, and he couldn't make it, so we ended up having a spot to fill, and so it was do you know anybody else who could bring another game? So my responsibility was to ask, expecting a hard no at that was not even a week ago. Yeah. And so I asked Brian, I'm like, you got all these games that you've built, can you bring another one? Expecting a hard no. He's like, yeah, I think I can do it.
Yeah.
And that speaks to all the effort you put into Tattoo Mystique, being buttoned up, dialed in, ready to go. The idea of just tweaking and making sure the other game is road ready. I think what was the focus, adding artwork to the cabinet?
Well, the unfortunate part is if everything goes into one cabinet, then you only have one cabinet. So bringing the second one is actually really hard.
But your other cabinet there. Talk about the art. The other cabinet you stuck in the side of those. And
yes. Well, so the other cabinet is a wide body, 2.0 wide body for older Gottliebs, and I love the older Gottliebs, but also the wide body is a different size, so you obviously need a different cabinet. It wasn't quite ready yet. It was ready enough that in 2 days of buttoning it up, I could do that. Yeah. But the whole idea was that the game, Amazing Spider-Man is the one you can see there. So it's a vintage Gottlieb Amazing Spider-Man, but it's got 2.0 rules, DMD video display, but also the other games that would fit in there. There's a James Bond, an older James Bond that you can imagine you could redo that with all kinds of rules, like they're doing the new James Bond. And then also Timeline fits into that. Stern Iron Maiden would also fit the same size cabinet, and then Pink Panther. So those are on the 2.0 list for the Gottlieb wide bodies.
So you'll have those done by October, probably.
Well, whenever you ask, I'll have to start buttoning that up.
So we got a few minutes left. I want to make sure I say that come and play all the homebrews. Mike Becker couldn't be with us. He's over there working on replacing a servo in his Fight Club games, but come and check out Fight Club as well. The whole homebrew row rolls right down into what we're calling our Pin DevCon theater down at the end. And so everybody has said they'd be willing to jump in and do a little deeper dive on some other part of their pinball journey. So there's a little dry erase board, high tech. We're gonna write down topics and times and stuff. And so definitely come in and drop in and sit down. I mean, it's designed, it's more compact than this, it's close. We wanna be having conversations with people that are interested about these things. So in the last, I think we got 2 minutes left here. Does anybody have any questions they wanna throw out to anybody, and we can get people to run up and respond? Or
got 3 minutes.
Yeah, what do you got here? We have a mic here if you want to jump on that, or just shout it out and we'll repeat it. Let's do that.
I'm curious, how big is the homebrew community by people and number of games kind of made?
Okay.
And then also, is this mainly a U.S. thing, or are you seeing this pick up in the G?
Okay, so the question is basically like, how big is the homebrew scene? How many projects in there is, and is it beyond the United States? So I'd have to look at some point. I think we were looking in our Slack channel at one point, and this is just as FAST company users, and there's lots of other companies that do hardware and stuff. I think it was like 200 some people, I think, in there, and this is different team members and stuff like that, building projects and stuff. So there's a lot, and granted, a lot of people like buy their projects, get started, and then maybe they just lumber along for a little while, and then
maybe they disappear.
Yeah, maybe they disappear altogether. But it's getting bigger, and I think what's really cool is that some projects will, like, you know, we're talking about, like, you know, Futurama, like, out of nowhere shows up. So I think that it is getting bigger, and I think that it's hitting that intersection, like I said before, with the maker community, people that want to build and make things exist. I think it's something that we're all like looking for. Yeah. Now, worldwide, I've got to be sure that like I tap out and sign offline before 11-ish when like Europe wakes up, because then you get the European people working on their projects and stuff like that, you know. And I think that, so there are, I don't think I've ever shipped anything to South America yet. But I think we've shipped stuff all over the world now. And so there's a lot of stuff all throughout Europe and things. Like in Australia, we ship a lot of stuff down there. So I know that there's a lot of these projects that are going on. And we talk about trying to, at some point, doing like a world tour where we'll just come couch dive at houses all over the world. And that'd be super fun.
Yeah. You know, one other thing, just to add to that, like there's shows, pinball shows are all over the country. And there's usually homebrew people showing up to those shows. So what you see here is basically like local people for the most part. But yet you have Tanner shipping his in. But yeah, so different shows have different games.
Right. Yeah. Check out Pinside. They have a homebrew section there, and that has, I don't know, 100 something odd projects. And there's a Facebook group called the Custom Facebook Builders. That has what, 1,000 something?
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of them. Not everybody's making games, but like every day there's
he
posts
posts
on
pictures
it.
of any project in the homebrew kind of vein. So
There's also how to build a pinball machine on Facebook.
Facebook page, and then there's also a YouTube channel.
Your YouTube channel is amazing.
Yeah, and Jake's,
Okay, so that's the one question we're gonna answer. We got we got to sign out.
15
Come and
seconds.
hang out with us. Like, this is what we do all the time. We will talk this stuff till you walk away. So like, thanks so much for sitting in, making pinball, making friends.